Hey everybody, so there's about 2 days left until the new year, and I wasn't sure if I was going to upload a video until next year, but I came across this article on LiveScience by Owen Jarus. I've done a bunch of his articles, and he's from what I can tell, he's a pretty cool, trustworthy guy, and he wrote this article called "The 10 Biggest Archaeology Discoveries of 2019." Kind of a cookie cutter type of end of the year wrap up article, which is, I think I went through it and it's pretty good. And most of these discoveries I covered on the channel as well. I just thought it would be a good way to wrap up the year. And most of you guys are probably on some sort of vacation, some sort of hiatus or break from work. And I thought this might be some pretty good listening. And who doesn't like end of the year wrap up shows? Anyway, so I thought there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and we'll just go through each one, and I'll just leave a few comments here and there. So the first one is the article. I forgot when exactly this was earlier this year. There was a 1700-year-old Roman cemetery and they found 17 decapitated skeletons, and their cut-off heads were resting between their owner's legs. So this was around 300 AD in England, and they were removed from the skulls were removed from their heads after death. So they died and then they were cut off. So I don't know if it doesn't seem like they were executed. It was more, they think it was more of some sort of ceremonial type of send-off, burial. Kind of think of a pyre. If you've seen Lord of the Rings or one of those types of movies where when someone would die, they would, by the way, spoiler alert, but I'm sure you guys have probably seen Lord of the Rings. When one character died, they sent his body off on a raft, and they lit it on fire as he was being sent off into the ocean. Again, this is very similar. Instead of sending him off into the ocean and setting you on fire, they would cut off your head and put it between your legs and then bury you. No grave goods were found with the headless individuals, though their bones were in good shape, suggesting the individuals were well nourished. Few of the individuals had tuberculosis, which was common in farming communities at the time. So these people were either, I'm not sure if they were Roman themselves or if they were a Proto-Celtic type of people who were conquered by the Romans for that sliver of time in history. One possibility of the reason why these people were buried this way was that the head was the container of the soul, and it needed to be removed, kind of like opening the cap off of a bottle to get stuff out, almost like a genie in the bottle type of thing. There are a few pictures here. So here's the excavation of the cemetery, which again, there were 17 people buried here that they found. There might be more. And this is how they found them. So you can see the head between their leg or their feet here. And then there's another one where this one was still intact. Not all of them were decapitated, but most of them were. I think 10 out of the 17 were decapitated. And then they found some other stuff like a comb made out of bones, which was pretty interesting. Here's another picture here. There are some other artifacts that they found. This one again, a bone comb on their pelvis, and this head is missing. I don't know where the head is here. And then one was underneath the knee here. I don't know why they would do that. Maybe there was some sort of seismic activity and then it moved that way. No one's really sure, but that is a pretty interesting way to be buried, especially in the time of the Roman Empire, where you would think a lot of those pagan type of beliefs would not have been would have been shed by that time, because that's pretty late in the Roman Empire, 300 AD. But yeah, that was number 10 on the list. Number 9, I don't think these are in any type of order. I think these are just 10, and you can just order them yourselves. This other one, there's a lot of stuff that came out of Egypt this year. So they found a 4,400-year-old tomb with the paint still there. It hasn't faded. It was remarkably well preserved. And this was this one in particular was constructed for an official named Kui, the tomb of Kui. And some of the hieroglyphs they found in the tomb reveal Kui's main titles included Overseer of the Kentui Shi of the Great House, or Great One of the 10 of Upper Egypt, and the sole friend of the Pharaoh. So this guy, no doubt about it, was some sort of high-ranking official. But I don't think you'll find anything else with his name on it, or I don't know, maybe you will. Maybe something might come out. Again, the paintings were amazing. So I think, yeah. So here's one of the pictures here. And this is, again, 4,400 years old. That's a long time. That's almost around the time that pyramids were allegedly being built. Now, I think the pyramids were built way before. But if we're just going by the mainstream timeline, then yeah, this is supposed to be around that time period. It's almost contemporary with that. The paintings include depictions of ships at sail, Egyptians working in the fields in complex patterns that are almost impossible to describe in words. I didn't do an episode on this, but then I did do an episode about ships, and Egyptians are linked to a bunch of different types of shipbuilding activities. So one of the most famous instances of Egyptians and ships was around the pyramids. They found they're around the perimeter of the pyramids, buried around the pyramids rather, were these sailboats. And then in the Red Sea, they found the remains of a port town that lied on the Red Sea, this trade route on the Red Sea. And that was long time speculated that the Egyptians were trading with Ethiopia, further around the Horn of Africa, further down, and also with India, and probably with other Mediterranean maritime civilizations like the Mycenaeans, or the people living on Crete at the time, the Minoans, all of these people, and then further north of Egypt were the Phoenicians, and all these different types of people were trading with Egyptian at the time. So it does make sense that they had ships. So I thought that was very interesting as well. The third one we're going to cover, the failed attempt to leave Africa. I did an episode on this. This was the skull, the 210,000-year-old skull, older than the Mislia cave skull in Israel, found in southern Greece. This is the earliest example of a Homo sapien skull found outside of Africa. Again, beats the Mislia skull in Israel. And of course, the oldest remains of a Homo sapien period were in Morocco, 315,000 years old. But I thought the interpretation of this was pretty interesting. So they think it was a failed attempt by humans to spread beyond Africa. And then later on, this is the most interesting bit, Neanderthals succeeded because of a 170,000-year-old skull found in the same cave. Reveals that Neanderthals flourished in the region for some time. So Homo sapiens got there, and then Neanderthals got there 30,000 years, 40,000 years later. That's just what we have, though. We really don't know, just based on those two types of, we can't develop a timeline from that. We can only develop a working timeline from what we have. So who knows if there was a war fought there and the Neanderthals beat out the Homo sapiens that tried to branch out, or maybe the Homo sapiens did succeed. We just haven't found any of their remains yet, because it's easily possible that there were some sparse or low population people living off the land, again in caves, in the wilderness. There could be communities of people living in any given area at that time, and no one would ever find out, especially if the populations were super low, as a lot of people think they were. But again, 210,000 years is a long time for stuff to decay and disappear. So who knows really what was going on at that time. And they talk a little bit about how it doesn't throw a monkey wrench out of Africa, which is the 70,000 to 50,000 years ago was supposedly the major dispersal out of Africa. It could have been 210,000 years ago. It could have been one of these waves, these proposed waves out of Africa. If you ask Bruce Fenton, then people were must at this time must have been living in Asia and modern day Indonesia and Australasia, and then made their way to Africa. But either way, it's very interesting to find in Greece of all places, and there are some photos here. So this is the skull. They found the back of the skull, and that's all they found. But the back of the skull is very, very similar to that of Homo sapiens, because the back of this part right here, if you can see my cursor, this is very uniquely Homo sapiens. Now, could it be another hominin that happened to have the same back of the head as us? Sure. But the fact that we found there's some in Mislia Cave, which is not that far from Greece, and Israel, which is just the other side of the Mediterranean, and the fact that there are all these remains like in Morocco, again, Morocco is another side of the Mediterranean, right next to the Pillars of Heracles, so it's just right there. They were confirmed. The Moroccan guy is human as well, so I think it's a safe bet to say this guy is human. I would say 95% chance this guy is human for sure, just to leave 5% for margin of error. Valley, again, we're going back to Egypt. Valley of the Kings. I think this is number 4 or 5. I already lost count. Valley of the Kings, where there was a ton of discoveries. There's royalty buried 3,000 years ago in the Western Valley. They found a workshop complex where workers manufactured material for the tombs. They were making pottery, furniture, gold, processing other things. They found a room dug into the valley that was used for mummification. There's remains of linen, rope, other materials from, again, mummification. And mummification is something we see around the world, but it's still a pretty unique and complex process, and it's pretty sophisticated for the time. They also found a piece of wood with 2 prongs that may have been used like a forklift to move furniture. Again, that's very interesting. They have some sort of technology here, albeit pretty rudimentary, but still, a forklift type of situation is very, very, I would say it's pretty groundbreaking, to be honest. And also something similar, a system of pulleys and some sort of forklift type of contraption was found somewhere in Greece as well. So again, if that's true, then this type of technology must have been traded between cultures. And I think that's very indicative and very helpful when we're trying to assess what happened in the past. There are some other examples of pottery with writing on it that they found, and there are records left behind by the Valley of the Kings workers. They were baking bread, storing food and water. So this is a full-fledged community going on here. This isn't just some camp, some fleeting area that people were just working and then moving on. People were actually living here and doing stuff for a living and contributing. There are 2 female mummies near the tomb of the powerful female pharaoh Hatshepsut. And again, this is all within the Valley of the Kings discoveries. So here's a picture which divides the east and west sections of the Valley of the Kings. Pretty interesting stuff. Here's a decorated pot, again, that if you were to look, it tells a story. It reveals life of the workers there. Here's another jar found during excavations, which is reconstructed. You can see all the potsherds here. Now, if you were, let's say, a naysayer or somebody who just doesn't believe the evidence, which again, there are a lot of people out there, they think this might be fake, just like dinosaur bones could be fake. They're all reconstructions, but I don't think so. I think this is very meticulous work. They're putting potsherds together, and of course it's not going to be perfect. There's a lot of missing pieces, but you could extrapolate from what they have what it really must have looked like. So again, it just is, this is one of those fundamental disagreements where you either accept it or you don't. I tend to think it's pretty interesting. I don't think this is all planted there, and if it is, I would stand corrected, but I would need some evidence for that. Otherwise, that's just speculation, you know. Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. So the next one, Bronze Age megalopolis. So I did do an article on this. In Israel, there was a population, I guess you would say an early Bronze Age settlement that was home to 6,000 people. So again, that's a huge city at the time. They found a ton of stuff: pottery fragments, flint tools, basalt stone vessels, a temple filled with burnt animal bones, figurines. So again, I think they also found some Scythian daggers as well. So it's very interesting that the Scythians had played a part in this. Oh no, excuse me. So I think the Scythian one was a different city in Israel at the time. That was about 3,000. That was around Bronze Age. This is early Bronze Age. So this is about 3,200 BC, around there. The Scythians didn't come down until a few thousand years later, about like 1200 BC or so, between 1200 to 600 BC, depending on who you ask. But I just think the Scythians have been around even at the very beginning of the Bronze Age as well, and probably further back. But anyway, it still stands that all of the stuff that they found in Assur in Israel, this just happens to be the biggest and oldest city that they found so far just this year. So there's a ton of stuff going on in Israel and Egypt that they're finding. And I think that would just be attributed to a renewed interest in the subject, technology, and funding. So again, all this stuff is, you're kind of seeing the fruits of their labor, but it's happening at such a rapid rate compared to even 15, 20 years ago, where you would just have to wait for years for anything to advance. The city's residential and public areas, streets, alleyways, and temples appear to have been carefully planned out. The one city that's not on the list, but I did an episode on this past year, was the lost city in the Khmer Empire. And again, they had the same thing: a very well thought out city, a planned city. They even had a sewage system, and they even had a hydraulic system in place where if it would rain too much, all the excess water would get diverted somewhere else. And again, this is no different here. So this idea of a planned city, they thought of a lot of issues that come up when you have a huge population of people living in close quarters with one another in a city. And again, 6,000 people is a lot of people to be living together. And they already had solutions in place. Sewage is a big one that they had to build into the city to address those issues. So again, this was going on early Bronze Age and probably beyond that. It's very interesting stuff. And one thing about a mega city like this is they must have, not only were they living from agriculture, they were living with other people traveling from one place to another, trading with each other, a lot of intermingling going on, a lot of varied languages going on, a lot of different dialects. So you have this nice melting pot for a while in the ancient world. And then there's one with Pontius Pilate, who is the guy who was a Roman prefect for Judea at the time of Jesus. And then everything that survived about the guy, there wasn't much on him aside from his associations in the Bible and some other things left over. And he was pretty much painted in a bad light, but according to this article, archaeologists found he built a street in Jerusalem that stretched 2,000 feet, connected to the Siloam Pool, which is where pilgrims go and bathe in fresh water, on the way to Temple Mount. And then also there are some coins attributed to him around the street, date to AD 30 to 31, so that's when he was prefect. So they found all this stuff, and the reason why this is such a big deal is because I did a few episodes on biblical archaeology, and when anything is found having to do with the Bible, it lends more credence to what was going on historically at the time, and especially in the New Testament. It's very interesting stuff. The street would have required 10,000 tons of quarried limestone rock to construct. So again, he was a real guy. This is, again, the jury's still out whether he was a real guy, but I mean, come on, the guy had coins with his face on it and his name on it. So someone that was somebody's face, right? Somebody was running things. So Pilate must have been the guy, especially now that there are these things attributed to him. Another thing out of Egypt, 30 perfectly preserved sealed wooden coffins dating back 3,000 years. I remember when this broke, I was going to do this article in a video. I just never got around to it. It got buried in my email, actually. So I'm just going to mention it now. So this was in a necropolis near Luxor, Egypt. Again, these 30 perfectly preserved mummies. I don't think they've done the genetic testing on them, but they will, and stay tuned for that. Probably next year, you'll start seeing that come out. These appear to be ancient Egyptian priests, and it's been 3,000 years since they were buried. So, I mean, wow, that's 1000 BC. This is pre-Roman Empire for sure, pre-Roman Republic. This is pre-Bible, pre-Old Testament, basically. This is still when the Old Testament was still an oral tradition. So it's very interesting stuff here. The time of Solomon, I think, 1000 BC, depending on who you ask. The outer wrappings of the mummies looked untouched. Archaeologists found that 23 adult males, 5 adult females, and 2 children were buried in the 30 wooden coffins. Analysis of the mummies and translation of the hieroglyphs is ongoing. And so again, these will emerge in the next few years. And then in the UK, they found. Oh wait, no. Oh, I forgot to show you guys these pictures. These are the pictures in Israel of the excavation. Pretty interesting. And then these are more. Oh yeah, this is a shield. So this is the shield that they found in the UK, 30 inches in diameter, found in July 2018, but it wasn't completed until last year. So this 2,200-year-old grave containing the remains of a man who died in his 40s, buried with a bronze shield, a chariot, and 2 horses in a leaping pose. So if you're buried with by the way, a chariot is pretty expensive back then. You have 2 horses, which are also expensive, being buried with you. You must have been some sort of big deal for sure. And let's just look at the picture here. So at the time, it wasn't green like this. Obviously, it's oxidized, so it would have been a brilliant color, and it would have been intricately done. And it almost looks like it's an embroidering. It's embossed. It looks like it's embossed. And this is where they found the grave here, and that's what it looked like. He was in his 40s when he died. So again, very interesting stuff. This is near Pocklington, England. If you're from Pocklington, shout out to you. That's you had a very exciting archaeological discovery in your town. And then here's another one in Iran. I think they found the remains of what looks like a wall, which stretches 71 miles, 115 kilometers, north-south between the Bamu Mountains in the north and an area near Zao Marg village in the south. It took an estimated 1 million cubic meters of stone to build. And they don't even know how tall it was or anything because it was such a long time ago. They think it might have been done by the Parthians because it dates to around 230 BC, around there. Oh, I'm sorry, 4th century BC and 6th century AD. So that's the window that they're putting it. So about 247 BC to 651 AD, either the Parthians or the Sasanians or the Sassanid Empire, and they could have built a wall. Now, obviously when you think of wall building, you think of either Hadrian's Wall or the Great Wall of China. And when you think about the Great Wall of China, especially, they already knew how to build walls even 9th, 10th century BC. They already had that technology. They already knew what the uses of that were, what the benefits of that were. They knew what that meant when they had to start building the thing. So again, Iran's not that far from China and that whole area. And so they were building walls. So it makes total sense. They don't know exactly when it was built. Again, they found pottery next to it. So they dated the pottery, which dates to 4th century BC, but who knows how long that wall was standing there before the pottery got there. So that's up to you guys to decide. Let's see if there are any other pictures here. No, that's the only picture I have. And then this last one are two infants buried about 2,100 years ago, where their helmets were made from the skulls of other children. This is pretty dark. It's off the coast of central Ecuador. So the helmets were placed tightly over the infants' heads. Archaeologists found it's likely that the older children's skulls still had flesh on them when they were turned into helmets, because without flesh, the helmets likely would not have held together. So that is pretty gruesome, and who knows exactly what the benefit was to them for doing this. Obviously, it was some sort of culture. It may represent an attempt to ensure the protection of these pre-social and wild souls. So they were really young when they died, so maybe it was maybe a form of guidance. Having older children's skull on your head could be indicative of a lot of things. Maybe, again, to have maybe that's symbolic of you're taking their experiences and maybe taking the benefits of that into the afterlife for safe passage when you're transitioning from this world to the next. I don't know. I thought that was pretty interesting though. And so anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'll have a link to this in the description so you guys can take a look at for yourselves. And yeah, have a happy new year. There's going to be a big episode at the start of next year, early next month. Stay tuned for that. I'll just give you guys a hint. It's going to be an interview, and just stay tuned. It'll seem random, but I think it'll be super interesting and super valuable, and for both you guys and for me. And for basically anybody who's interested in archaeology and want a fresh viewpoint on the subject. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. What were some of your favorite things this year that you read about, either you heard from my channel or something that you read on your own? Drop a comment and get some discussion going, and I'll talk to you guys later.